as my dad told me back when I was 12, that when I, got beaten in national championships, there's more to life, right, than skating in a circle, whether you're the best at it or not.
Welcome to Building Champions for Life, where we dive into the minds of extraordinary leaders, trailblazers, and champions from every corner of the world. I'm your host, Kirk Spahn, and together we're going to meet with visionaries who've conquered challenges, shattered ceilings, and redefined what's possible. From sports, tech, entertainment, to entrepreneurship, our guests have one thing in common. They're building legacies of greatness, and they're here to share their passion and their process with you. Welcome to the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Building Champions for Life. Today is such a fun day for me. When you grow up and there are certain people that their stories impact you, all of our champions have such inspiring stories. This one in particular hits very, very close to home. One of our partners and inspiration, Dr. Jim Lair, who works with us at the ICL Foundation, who coaches just so many world champion athletes. He always comes back to one person in particular, and that one person is Dan Jansen. And Dan is here. One of my earliest memories is being allowed to stay up late at night to watch Dan compete in the racing. What Dan does, a kid from New York, every 4 years you're watching sports and the Olympics brings you into things you've never seen done before. And speed skating has always been one of those things that we talk about, the next day at school, and just one of those kind of magical Olympic sports where, for that time, it's everything. It's like the fastest man in the world. It's the training. I just remember comparing Dan Jansen's legs to Boris Becker. Was the only guy I saw that had tree trunks for legs. But what was so incredible about Dan and his story is who he is. And it seems like we're aging all of ourselves, because to me, it seems not that long ago in watching Dan, but I think the last time we saw him compete was, I believe, in 1994. So it was a little while. I think it was same time that I was watching my Knicks play the Pacers, and the same results as last night. So it's a little bit hard to talk about right now. But for those of you that haven't had a chance to see him, Dan is a 4-time Olympian. But beyond that, is 7-time World Cup champion, 2-time World Sprint champion, 46 World Cup victories, 75 World Cup medals. 8-time world record holder in the 500 and 1,000 meter speed skating. This is just numbers that are kind of mind blowing. And then were you the first guy to break the sound barrier in an airplane? And that was not you, but I think you were the first man to ever break.
Well,
36
not the
seconds.
Sound barrier, but the 36 seconds in the 500, which at the time was a big deal. Yeah.
No, of course. And then your story of just all these P's that we talk about. Your story of perseverance is obviously a huge one. We remember the tragedy with your sister, who was so important to you, and how that drove you. And, the word perseverance, persistence, grit, resilience, they're just like over your head like a halo, and in such a cool way. And we're going to talk about how, you can apply that to everything in life, because that was a while ago and you've done some amazing things since then. And, the concept of building champions for life is not, as you know, the medals you receive or the accolades, but it's the process, and it's how you apply that into your life. So I'm super psyched to have you here. So welcome, Dan. And why don't you just take us back to where you grew up and how you built a passion for speed skating?
Sure. First of all, thank you for that introduction. So I grew up in Wisconsin, a suburb of Milwaukee, and it's, people always say was speed skating a big sport back then. Well, compared to now, actually in the U.S., it was pretty big. I say locally, in the surrounding states, call it the Midwest. So Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, all had clubs, speed skating clubs, and in all these little towns and cities of each state, and that just don't exist anymore. But they did when I was a kid. But more so, the two main reasons I started and then continued to skate were because the actual hometown where I grew up is called West Allis, the largest suburb of Milwaukee. But when I grew up, there was exactly one refrigerated 400-meter speed skating oval in the United States, and it was in West Allis. It was literally 2 miles from my home. And it was outdoor then, believe me, outdoor, cold, windy, brutal. But it was our cold, windy, brutal track. And it made us strong, and the rest of the competitions we went to were all on lakes and ponds. But because that track was there, all of the top skaters, at least from my generation and a little bit afterwards, came from the Midwest because they would come to Milwaukee, to West Allis to skate and train. And, so I played all other sports growing up. I was a good athlete. I loved, baseball and football and those things. And I could do pretty much what I wanted, but in the winters we would skate. And the other reason I started was because I number 9 of 9 children. And so,
wow, 9 of 9.
Yeah, 9 of 9. And all my brothers and sisters, I had 5 sisters, 3 brothers. At some point in their lives, they all speed skated. And so, I was 4. They just took me to the track and found a pair of skates and off I went. Like, I didn't really have a choice. It's not like I was forced to do it, but it was just what we did. And so then I started to get pretty good on a state, local, and then a national level in my age group. And then by the time I was a freshman in high school, so 14, that's when the significant event that took me and, changed the path of my life toward the Olympic Games happened. And that was the Olympics in Lake Placid, New York, 1980. And everybody talks about Miracle on Ice, right? When the U.S. hockey team beat the Russians and went on to win the gold medal. And I always say that was great, but that wasn't the moment for me. Mine was watching Eric Heiden. Eric Heiden won 5 gold medals in my sport. We only have 5 races, everything from 500 meters to 10,000 meters.
Wow.
And everything in between. It's like Usain Bolt winning the 100 up to the 5K and all of them in between. That's what it's like. And so Eric was, of course, from Wisconsin. I trained, at the same place he did every night. And, he was a hero of mine. And so I knew then I wanted to go to the Olympics. I had no dreams of a medal or certainly not of being another Eric Heiden, but I wanted to go to the Olympics. And that's when I decided, I was going to pretty much end all my other sports and start thinking about the Olympics and making this a full-time year-round training.
And that was that is always a critical thing for, in our, we talk about building champions for life. It's when the sort of the moment or that time period when the passion becomes a purpose.
Yeah.
Because we know, because there's a big difference between passion and purpose. I'm passionate about music. I have no skills in it, but then when you decide something becomes your purpose, so that Olympics really crystallized. It's like, hey, I'm good at this thing, I'm playing a lot of sports, but wait, that is where I want to be. Like, that's your spot. So that's it's into the next P. Then it sort of fits into a pyramid, because obviously, all right, so you get the purpose, and then the next P, that's probably the one that's the biggest in many ways, is the process, right? When you decided that and wanted to make that your goal, what was your process?
It became, it changed from doing this in the winter and maybe a little bit of summer training, but to becoming, you're training every day in the off season. It's every day, mostly twice a day. You're not on the ice all summer. You're running, you're doing your weight training, you're running hills, you're everything, a lot of cycling, things like that. And it's a brutal sport to train. It's very, very difficult physically. So, most kids at that age, it's hard. They don't want to hurt, right? They don't want to do it. And I just loved it. To me, that was certainly part of the process, but I never I can't say I loved running up a ski hill and, being in pain, but I loved that part of it. I loved what it did to my mind. And I loved when I was done. I loved where I believed it was taking me. And so, that became my process until the end. That changes along the way. Certainly when you start learning your body's limitations and the things quality versus quantity and all of those things. But that comes with age. Luckily when we're young, we can handle a lot of quantity. Maybe, certainly when I was 18, I was doing way too much and way more than I needed to, but your body can handle it for the most part at that point. At 28, my last years, I was very wise and I knew it was still hard, but I knew what my body needed and didn't need.
So just to stick with that, because a big part, at the end of the day, our audience is people who have a dream. It's the kids, it's families that are looking to pursue excellence. And if you can go back to that process, you hit on something really interesting that the 18-year-old you was able to handle it, did a lot. Were there any, looking back, sort of habits and rituals that you wish you had earlier, like in that process? Is there something that you could recommend? Because everyone's journey is different, everyone's body is different, but were there any specific parts of that?
I would, a big one for me was when I did kind of realize, all right, this is my goal. Is first it was just the Olympics. It wasn't a medal, but it was just the Olympics. And I trained a lot with, as Jim said, Dr. Lair, the ultimate mission. I had that in mind all the time or too much. I learned a great lesson about goals, luckily when I was probably 18, 19, in that, know what your long range goals are. And certainly, you can write them down. You can look at them periodically, but your long range goal is there. You know what it is. Then you got to get to the daily stuff, the weekly stuff. Then you set short-term goals along the way, because if it's always only your long-term goal, I mean, in my case, it's very difficult to be training at 100% twice a day when your goal is 3 or 4 years away. It's really hard to motivate. So you've got to find shorter term goals along and to set them, and then take those one by one. And pretty soon you're in your Olympic year and you can focus more on that.
So, I mean, and that's so huge. You've talked a little bit about these P's, and I think we'll sort of interweave the process into it because it's such a critical part.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that for young champions and people seeking this, that people are critical. And I think over the course of your life, it's very people that everyone remembers the tragedy that you had, with your sister who you're really close with and passing away. But who are the people that were impacting you, the coaches, the family members, because it takes a village to create a champion in a lot of ways.
It's sort of, that question it's easy, yet it's difficult, because if you look back at the different stages you go through, there's different people there. Now, some stages, the same people are there the whole time, the family, some of the coaches, but it might change. A coach might change from my first to second or third games. And then you just, you adapt to that and you do what you think is best for yourself. But for me, it was, I guess, the rocks, the ones that I can think of that were there really from beginning to end was always my family. Like, those were the ones that I could lean on if I needed. Those were the ones that really understood. More so, it's you go through, in our sport especially, it's a sport where gets very popular in the United States every 4 years, but other than that, not so much. But we go to the Netherlands or Norway and everybody knows us and they know what we do and they know our times and they know everything about us. And so it's kind of an interesting life and differences when we would compete and travel in Europe rather than here in the US. My story over the years changed, and by the time my last Olympics came around, that did change, and most people in the U.S. did know my story, but for a little bit of the wrong reasons. I didn't say wrong, but not for winning, for the other things, for my sister's passing, for my falls. So for my struggles more so than my victories. And that's okay. But it's something that you just have to,
Sure.
Those are the things you can't control, right? And we always talk about controlling what you control and what you can control. And the things you can't, you just have to accept and either make them, as we talk about, part of your process, part of your purpose, but they get woven in there whether you want them or not.
100%. And it's just, it's tough when you talk about it in generalized terms, because this career you had that we're talking about, 4 Olympic Games, but it's every day around that, right? It's the training time, it's winning these world championships that, no, we get it. They're not the Olympics. And yes, you are on that grand stage, but that's not where you are. It's an everyday consistent battle. So, you talk about being inspired by Eric and this incredible Olympic dominance, coaches, family. And it's fascinating to be in the right place. I actually find it very interesting. And Malcolm Gladwell, who is an ICL champion as well, has shared stories about that, whether Bill Gates being by this computer, that they're...
I've read the book. Yeah,
exactly.
It's very good.
So it's wild to think that you, and obviously you turn around and go, oh, look where I was. And, but as you said, I guess, we have our sort of set script here we talk about, but I want to go off of our script and say, if that wasn't there, your mindset, well, let's just talk about, I believe in you. I've obviously feel like I've known you for decades now, but it sounds like your power, your mental power, you would have been great at whatever you chose to do because you had something inside of you that drove you more than the others, right? That's what's,
I think so. But how many guys do you meet who, say, oh, I played semi-pro ball, or I did, and it's just like, all right, I get it. But were they really that good? You just don't know. And so I don't want to be one of those guys who say, yeah, I could have played professional ball. I don't have any idea. I was a good athlete. Yeah. Maybe that's all I was. And because I could do a bit of everything. But I do know for a fact that I had a work ethic that would have taken me as far as I could have gone, as far as I was physically capable of going in whatever I chose to do, for sure. Because as I said, I loved the work part of it. I loved the process. And, I remember being, I think 16 years old, and it was kind of my first year that I made a world team, a world championship team, and junior worlds, and even a senior team. And, it's June. I go to the park behind our house, and I'm doing these jumps up on just this picnic table. And I'm one leg up, down, down, up, down, down, single leg, and then switch legs and all these things. And as I doing it, I just thought, well, everybody's doing this. That was what I thought. I thought I have to do this because the other guys are doing it right now too. They weren't like I.
You know what? It was that Adidas commercial. Nike had Just Do It, and Adidas had a great commercial in the 90s, which was like someone somewhere is practicing.
Yeah.
And but you were that guy. It's I
guess I was, and I.
Yeah. And that, but how many world championships later? And I guess it's a mixture, though. I'm wondering because even at the same time on the other side, there is this element of, there are a lot of people that did train very hard, but didn't, actually make it. So was there a Phelpsian, Michael, they talk about Michael Phelps having the perfect body for swimming. Was there something you had that coaches, when you were on the ice, were like, wait, hold on, there's something special here?
So, great question. I think, so the answer is yes, I did have, let's call it a very good and somewhat natural feel for the ice now, that, and where your power comes from and where that speed comes from. Having said that, I didn't have that when I was 12. I was learning it, but then I grew. Because I was kind of scrawny at 12, and then all of a sudden, I go through puberty. I grow. I get big, stronger, and then it all kind of 1 year. It was like boom, and here he goes. He's off. But what I thought of when you were asking that question is very simple. The easiest comparison I can give you in that my brother Mike, who's just 18, 20 months older than I am, was a great skater. He was on 2 world teams with me. He just missed 2 Olympic teams by like a tenth of a second. So what made me, better than him? What was it? And, I passed him relatively early. Like our first 84 was my first Olympic team and when he missed his first by a small amount. And so I had passed him by that point, 17, 18 years old. And why? The reason it really was we were training together every day.
Yeah.
So it's not like I outworked him, but now at that point anyway, later on, he was an outstanding football player. So he was still kind of doing both things. Yeah. But at that age, he was doing everything I was doing or vice versa. And so I just technically skated better than he did. I had a better feel for the ice, and why, I don't know. Like I was blessed with that, I guess, but sure, I worked at it and I got way, way better as my years went on, but something was there that was not.
It's really interesting because the champions that we've talked to are so diverse, and now in meeting with you and working with race car drivers, that fast twitch, that vision, right? That, I mean, in a weird way, you're the car, right? You're speed skating. I mean, you're going around just like NASCAR. I mean, you're going around this oval. You're not driving a car, but your legs are.
Right.
But I think of my sport, like with tennis, and Pete Sampras's serve is God. His body, his elasticity, his explosiveness. So there always is that mix. But I think taking advantage of that process it goes back to. But I do want to share because people are young. I just found out that our commencement speaker this year, graduation, was born in 1999. So maybe we're talking about the 94 Olympics. Yeah. And by the way, she's already retired at tennis. She's born in 99.
Oh,
so I guess we should, again, not that you're known for that, because I mean, people stayed up late to watch you. I mean, I literally remember asking my parents, like, I want to stay up to see Dan Jansen. Like, you were the name of those Olympic Games, which in itself is pretty special. And I will say it was not because of slipping and fall. Like, and it's sad because I know, one of our greatest champions and very close with Dr. Lair is Monica Seles. And she always talks about shy, one of the greatest competitors in the history of any sport. I mean, for female athletes, she's just a beast. But, she said, I don't want to be known as the person that got stabbed, right? And the same way, I hear what you're saying, like, I'm not the guy whose sister, a lot of people have tragedy, but for those that don't know, if you can just share a little bit of your story, I mean, the perseverance is insane, because as I do remember, you were a big name coming at Olympics. You had been winning a lot. You were, and the word expected is a bad word to say in an Olympic game, but there were high hopes.
Yeah, well, I mean, so going into the 88 Olympics, so a year prior, almost exactly a year, my sister Jane was diagnosed with leukemia. She had just given birth to her 3rd little baby girl, and just routine blood checkup, still in the hospital, found low platelets, and they found it was leukemia. So she battled for a year and, was beating it for a while. It was a tough, long battle. She had to live in Seattle, have a bone marrow transplant. And, as we said, we're from Wisconsin. So we were back and forth. I was back there donating platelets and doing what we all could. Long story short, Jane, she lost her battle, and it happened to be the morning of the 500 meters, my 500 meter event at the Olympics in Calgary. Now, yeah, I was favored for gold. I won my first world championship 7 days before, 1 week before. And by the grace of God, it just so happened that the world championships were in Milwaukee that year in West Allis on my home track, but more so, Jane was in the hospital. I was able to skate and then go to the hospital and be with her. And I left the hospital with a world championship, with a medal, and gave her my medal and told her I would see her after the season in March. But I had to go Calgary. The Olympics are next week. And then I had no idea 7 days later she would be gone. I mean, it happened that fast. And so the morning of my 500 meters, they called and said she wouldn't make it through the day. So that was just, I don't have to get into the whole day, but it was just a mental fight, trying to just even deciding if I should skate or not was the first question, which we decided as a family, what do you think she would have wanted? And that answered it right there. So anyway, I fell first stroking of the first turn of my race. I fell, and then 1,000 meters, 4 days later, I was leading about 200 meters to go, and I fell again. And so that was my Olympics. I lost my sister, and I didn't cross the finish line in 2 races that I could have won, certainly won medals. And it was a tough one, to say the least. And that's where, if people hadn't known my name prior to, that's when Dan Jansen became a name that, people at least knew who I was.
But the story goes on, because that definition of perseverance and grit is the fact that you continued on. I mean, you pulled it, not only did you pull it together, but I mean, that was just the start of your winning, right? So, I mean,
it was, I was just starting to, and it sounds crazy. I was already a world champion, or at least in the 500 meters 2 years before, at 20 years old. But I say I was just starting to, take this the wrong way, but in my mind, I was just starting to get good.
Yeah.
Right. I was just
100%. It makes sense. No, you were coming into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, then now, this happened in the 88 Olympics, but once I was able to sort of deal with that and grieve and then start looking forward, then things go great again. Now I'm starting to win, world titles each year, World Cup races every weekend. And then by 4 years after that, 92 comes around and I'm favored again, 500 anyway. And, this one was till to this day, it's a little puzzling, although as I got older, I think I know what we did wrong. But bottom line is I finished 4th in the 500. I was going to win. I hadn't finished worse than 1st or 2nd the entire season. And I just, I've set my first world record 2 weeks before. So I was, favored and feeling great. And I just went out and was kind of flat. And I didn't really look back for a long time, because I felt good and confident and all of those things. But I think it was a training thing. When I set that world record in Switzerland a couple of weeks before the Olympics, we were still training pretty hard. We were just finishing up our last block of training. And we're thinking, man, I'm going fast and we're still training. So now we're going to rest. And we got 2 weeks to just put it on cruise, and we're going to be flying. We put it on too much cruise. So you can do that now, I know, but you can't. You can lay off the volume, but you cannot lay off the intensity. And yeah. And that's when I look back as I started to learn more and more about training and those types of things. I think, we didn't do anything even intense. We didn't do almost any speed work at all for 2 weeks. And I'm a sprinter. I mean, you've got to.
And you would think it's just supposed to be there. You're thinking you got it locked in. They're like, let's take it easy. But that coming back, that maybe your body needed that push, that extra something. Well,
for sure.
I mean, you came back. So you came in 4th. And then I remember, tell me if this is true or not, because Doc, we love Doc. Doc tells a lot of Dan stories. The one I remember from years ago was the 5 setters. For tennis, you got to love the 5 setters. No one loves the 5 setters. Like, Dan didn't love the 1,000. Didn't love the 1,000. Yeah. The story as I remember it is Doc said to write down, we all had our doctoral journals, and and I think it was something like, I love the 1,000 meters. Is this true? Is this a true story?
100% true story. He is not lying. He didn't make that one up. So, in fact, I went to see him for the first time. So 92 games. So it would have been around 91. And just by coincidence, so a couple of reasons. So every single interview I did, and I'm not exaggerating, everyone I did after the 88 games asked me, among other things, but two questions were always in them. Are you going to be thinking about your sister next time you step to the line at the Olympics? And are you going to be thinking about falling? And so there was a agent I had at the time. He had happened to read an article on Jim Lair that he was working with tennis players. And so he goes, what do you think of this? And this was, sports psychology at that time was.
No one wanted to admit it was a weakness. Yeah, that was a big no-no.
Exactly. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I wasn't, mentally in the dumps or anything. I just thought, yeah, why not? Like, let's just go talk. So back to that, we went down. He was in Bradenton at the time, and I went there and we talked about a couple things. Those two things I mentioned, and the other thing was the 1,000 meters, because the 500 was a race that I dominated for a long time, and I knew I was the best, and I would get to the start line and kind of had this tunnel vision, and I couldn't wait to get to the line, and I loved that feeling I had mentally, and sort of I could get in the zone before a 500 with the snap of a finger, and 1,000 meters, I couldn't. Honestly, I didn't like the race as much. I would get tired in the end, and I had the speed and I did have the strength. But when you over and over start to get tired at a certain point in the race, you get there and your mind says, oh, this is where you should be getting tired, right? It doesn't matter how strong you are. Yeah. And so I talked to him about that and wanting to go to the line for 1,000 with that same mindset that I do in the 500. So that's when the work began on the 1,000. And he told me a story actually about, now I could be wrong on the name. It might have been one of the Gullickson brothers.
Yeah. Tim or Tom.
Might have been Tim, and, was terrible in tiebreakers. And every tiebreaker he would lose. And so he did this he just ended up hating tiebreakers. So Jim started to do that with him. He made him write it down. And so he tells me this story. He's like, well, let's at least try this. Write it down on everything. I've got it pasted up over my house, everywhere, my bedside table, the refrigerator, and every place you can think of. And again, when he told me, first of all, I'm early 20s, and I'm thinking it's all well and good, but I know that I don't like the race that much. What's it going to do? I write this down, and post it. And he goes, I know, I get it. Just it's, well, back to the process. He said, it's a process. And he said, you may not believe it, but you can train your mind to believe it. It just takes time. It takes repetition. And so I'm going to jump ahead here, but so I did this literally. And I was very, very good student of Jim's because I believed in him and I did everything he said. I just did it. So I kept my journals to the T every day. I wrote things that, I love the 1,000 thing. So now we're jumping ahead to 6 months before the 94 games, and not even 6 months because we're on ice. Anyway, we're in the Netherlands for a World Cup, and it was Wednesday. We're doing our tempo workout, which is just a good couple things hard at race speed, and then you're done. And I remember getting over to the pads and sitting down and resting, and I without prompt, I just thought to myself, man, I can't wait for the 1,000 this weekend. And I literally stopped. I stopped and sat, and I go, what did you just say to yourself? I just said, I can't wait for the 1,000 meters. I'd never said that before. I'd never thought it before, anything. And it was so interesting And when I won it that weekend, and from then on, I had, I didn't have to convince myself anymore. I didn't have to write it down. I still did write it down, but I didn't have to. It was really an interesting process, and it takes a while. That's the thing. Like when we first started, you think, well, every day and you're doing the same thing, but after time, it burns in there and it burns into your brain, and it's strange things.
Manifesting with the work, people talk about it's like every new age thing. Oh, just manifest, just think about it. Well, yeah, think and do. It's not just the think part, because but that right. Click, that mental click is it's like, it's almost the key that unlocks, like you do all the work and you're ready to go, but something's holding you back. And when that unlocks it, and then for those, again, to finish this sort of cycle in the story, ironically, at the 94 games, this 1,000, what happened there?
Happened to be the one so yeah, and now I'm going into 94. And again, so we got to go back, because I think we mentioned it before, but now for the first and only time in history of the Olympics, they were going to, they were stagger the summer and winter games. They weren't going to be on the same year. So as Winter Olympians, they were going to hold another one in 2 years. So we went from 92 to 94. I knew I wasn't done. I knew that I still loved what I did, and I was still improving, and I can hang in there 2 more years, but
yeah, like two sounds better than 4 to me.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but going in now, those 2 years, I was absolutely just obsessed. My coach and I, we went at it hard but smart, and everything was just great. And not only that, I'm starting to skate good thousands too. I'm winning every 500. So I went into Lillehammer. I had the 5 fastest times in history, and the 500 were all mine. And so, I hadn't lost, I hadn't been beaten all season in the 500. So obviously I'm the favorite. I'm going to go in there and win the thing. And I didn't. I slipped in the last turn. Now, I felt good mentally. I've been back over that one 1,000 times and more. I wasn't nervous in a negative way. I was nervous in a great way. Like I can't wait to get to the line, like I always did. And I think, I don't know, I got to the last turn, maybe pushed a little too much in the last turn instead of just waiting for the apex and getting all my speed. And I slipped a lot. Like I tried to get it back really quickly after I slipped the first time, and then I kept slipping. So when you lose all your speed in the turn, you're done, because that's where we gain our speed, right? And so it, it didn't happen. And like everybody was in shock, myself, Jim, my coach, the world, basically, because, it just happened again. And now, of course, everybody's talking about choking and the pressure of the Olympics. And I was just, I don't know. I knew what they were saying, but Jim was great right away. He's like, look, this one's done. You got 1,000 meters in 3 days. That's what's next. And I kind of I guess mentally wanted to feel sorry for myself for at least a night. And he wouldn't let me. He's like, that one's over. There's nothing you can do. And it even hurts today a little bit that I don't have an Olympic medal in the 500, because that was my race. But it's reality. Like it is what it is. And so the interesting thing was that people thought, well, now he's done because he didn't win his race, and the 1,000 meters not his race. But in my mind, I had won a couple World Cups leading up in the 1,000. This year was different than ever, because I was just on all season, and then also I thought, look, I slipped. That doesn't mean I skated a bad race, right? I know how I feel on the ice, and I feel great. I feel strong. I feel like everything's good. So a slip doesn't mean you're skating bad. A slip means you slipped, right? And, it's like I double faulted once. That doesn't mean I'm serving horribly.
Exactly.
Yeah, obviously it happened at a bad time, but
we have 4 hours to do that. You have like 30. You have 40 seconds.
Well, exactly, right.
But then you did come. Then you did come back. So there is a positive to this. Yes.
So there is. So the bottom line is I got one race left, and it's 1,000 meters. It's a race that, yeah, I didn't like that much a few years earlier, but a race that I believed in myself, and Jim did, and Peter Miller, my coach, did. Other than those three, I'm not sure anyone else in the world did, but it wasn't like I went there and said, don't worry, that, all is well, you're going to win this thing. Absolutely not. In fact, I felt terrible in warm up, and then I just sort of let it go. I was just like, whatever, I'm not going to expect anymore. I'm just going to do. And
you pulled.
And I went, it was weird. Yes. When the gun went off, I felt totally different than I did in warm up. I felt great. I felt easy. And when that race is coming easy, that's a good thing for me, because you got to hang on in the last lap. It's considered a sprint, but it's, a minute at that time, 1 minute and 12 seconds. So to go all out for that long you got to have some endurance, right? And yeah, I felt good. I got to this with 200 meters to go, and I saw what my split times were. And my coach before the race, he came, he said, he said 2 words to me in warm up. He pats me on the butt and he goes, last 200, and he skates away. Like, he meant last 200 meters. You got to, that when you're going to be tired, keep it together or keep your technique. And so I got there, and that's all I thought about. And I crossed the line. I looked up, and it was a big WR next to my time for the world. And a world record in 1,000 for me was a big deal.
Yeah. I think for most people, we're going to give you that one, because that's our kind of last P, which is that personalization, right? You come through, talk about process, perseverance, the people around you, but with everyone's journey is different. So the last P is probably the most critical, which is really how you internalize it. And that last P of personalization is personal perspective. So looking back now, because let's just quickly run through how you apply this. You've overcome the demons, right? It's like you're not the faller, you're a world record holder, you've won the gold, but you have a lot of your life left. All right. I mean, you're 20 years old, so carrying this idea about being a champion, that mindset, what do you think, how did you make it a personalized journey, and what's been your purpose beyond that? As doctors, like your super purpose once that, your sort of short-term purpose is fulfilled?
I think that the whole journey, the good and the bad, gave me a perspective that, so when I won, it was, look, nobody was as relieved and happy, and nobody's more thankful than I am, believe me. But I also had, and continue to have, a little bit of, kind of like I did before or after the 500, of kind of, look, one slip doesn't mean I'm skating poorly. Well, great race doesn't mean anything other than I had a great, it's hard to, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but there's, as my dad told me back when I was 12, that when I, got beaten in national championships, there's more to life, right, than skating in a circle, whether you're the best at it or not. And so that it was a huge part and a hugely important part of my life. But now, I was retired at 28. And so I hope to have, 75 years after that. I don't know. But there's a lot to do or to live. And so learn from what I did, and use that to whatever I do from that, moving forward. And whether it's helping others to become their best, which has sort of become my passion. It's whether it's drivers or hockey players or other speed skaters that I kind of mentor. It's teaching them about that last thing. And for me, it's more perspective. And, it's kind of like, and you can say it about any sport, about any job, is that's what you do, but that's not who you are. You are much more than just that.
That exactly. I mean, to be an Olympic hero it's incredibly special, but at the same time that, that weight of gold is real. And so what would you go back, I guess now, to either the 15-year-old you or the people you're working with now, and what would be some of the advice that you would give about any part of that, the process, whatever it would be?
Yeah. So and they've probably heard it before, but sometimes it helps to hear it from somebody who has reached that point, is that be grateful that, first of all, that you're doing this right now. Like, first of all, how many people are able to do what you're doing right now, whatever level you're at, and enjoy it. Like, you have to go through the hard work and put in some pain and all that, but even that has to be part of the fun. It just does. And if you work every day and never enjoy any part of it, you'd have to really look long and hard to show me somebody who's reached the top level, who's never had fun. Like, you got to have fun and love what you do. And I think there's, great tennis players probably who had to learn. Agassi comes to mind. He kind of had to learn a lot of lessons right along in his career. And
I mean, the love.
He was great. That talented, all that.
Yeah, the love, and he found his passion for education, helping others. Like, what he really said is, when it became not about me, when I was younger, it was about me. And there's only certain how you can do, but when it sort of became that super purpose, and that's why obviously people with the drive, hey, I want to help my family. I mean, so many great athletes, it comes down to like, I have to get my family out of poverty. I have no other option. So, but I think,
I get it.
Your story has been inspirational for so many reasons. And I think now with kids starting young, are there any exercises, because we met up and you were in the gym, I mean, there are any things that just chatting with people here who are looking for anything to become the best, right? Like, it's a Novak, any little edge. So are there any things that you found on them, on Doc's pyramid, that physical, mental, emotional, spiritual pyramid that you would sort of hone in on?
I mean, it's really hard because everybody's different, but I think it's super important to find that purpose. And you mentioned it, everybody's purpose is different, but your purpose isn't, like, don't confuse your purpose with winning everything. Like, that's not your purpose. Like, that might be a goal and something you want to do, but why do you want that? Or why do you do what you do? And it's really important to learn that, because a lot of people don't know that, and then they actually do achieve it, and they go, well, now what? Right. And I've been very interested when I've heard several, quite a few people say, oh, I got to the point and then I won. And then I'm like, oh, so what? I was never like that. I was grateful before, and I was grateful. And so I was able to move on. Yeah. I have a foundation, we help families with their cancer, with expenses, families battling with cancer, things like that. So your purpose might not even be in your sport, in your job, but that can be a vehicle to get there. And if you reach that goal, use what got you there in your other parts of life. Don't just think, well, that was this part of life, that's over, because what you went through to get there is a huge part of life.
Well, it's applicable, right? Even though you're in this win column, like we talk about that with all of our champions. I mean, in some ways, master something, master of something, you can become master of all, because the application is there. That's what we're all about. I mean, right, at ICL and the foundation and the concept to you, I mean, when I just say the word building champions for life, when you think of a champion, how would you define that? Because you've been it in so many different ways.
Yeah, I think it's a good point and a good question. I think so. I talk about it, in speeches, and I'm changing the word a little bit, but we talk about success, right? And there are so many different definitions. If, you could give 100 people a piece of paper and have them write down a definition, and you might get, 75 different answers. And, varying from becoming a billionaire to owning a Mercedes to having 3 children and, a great job and just being happy. And you have to define your own success before anything. Like, what does success mean to you first? I'm not saying it's wrong if it's money, but that's generally not going to keep you happy, like, in the long run, right? So find a good definition of success, what that means to you. And then, getting back to the champion part of it that's a great another great saying, champions do not become champions when they win the event, right? But in the hours, weeks, months, and years they spend preparing for it. That's what makes you champions. That gold medal on my wall downstairs, that doesn't make me a champion. I'm really proud of it. That's not what makes me a champion. It's everything I went through to get that and what I've done afterwards, really, to be honest.